Welcome into Deep Waters here on ProBox TV. 5 days a week bringing you boxing news. Make us part of your boxing routine every single day. Like, subscribe. You'll get a ton of information out of it. Today, we are talking about Oleksandr Usyk. That's right, greatest heavyweight of his era. A lot of people have him number one right now, pound for pound. But he has talked about going back down to the Cruiserweight division. Does that make any sense? Jimmy Smith alongside Chris Algieri in studio. Paulie Malignaggi joining us via Zoom. He got to stay home today. Look, the first thing I thought when I read this news, when I heard this was happening, I thought this is like winning the NBA Finals and saying, boy, I'm going to do the same thing in the EuroLeague. I'm not saying the EuroLeague isn't tough. That's not what I'm saying. But once you win the NBA Finals, that's the top of the mountain. The heavyweight division, the jewel of heavyweight boxing, is boxing. So what I didn't get is why go back down to Cruiserweight? What does it do for him?
Well, I have a couple thoughts about this. I mean, yes, initially I was like, why would you do that? That makes no sense.
Having been at Cruiserweight, it's not like he hasn't been there, right?
Yeah, he's been there. It's been a couple years now, and he's been developing into a heavyweight. He's gotten better and filled in. So, I think he weighed in at 223 his last fight, so now you got to pull off 23, 24 pounds, to go back down at the age of 37. A lot of reasons not to do it, but then also I'm thinking, I'm like, why would he do this? Now, he's not the kind of guy who trolls, right? He's not like a Terence Crawford who said, I'm going to go jump up with this guy, or Ryan Garcia saying he's going to go fight Benavidez. He's not a troll type guy. He's a very serious guy, those Eastern Europeans. So there's got to be a reason for this. And if he's saying it, you got to believe him. This is something that they're really thinking about. And I think that I don't think he wants to fight these other heavyweights. I don't think he wants to get in there with a Zhilei Zhang. Because you got a guy who's got the power, and he's much, much bigger. He's tired of dealing with these bigger guys. He said he's tired of eating up to the weight. And it's just losing to Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua. You're like, okay, I get it. Lose to Zhilei Zhang. You lose to Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker would be a tough fight for him to deal with. It's stylistically and just his ability to move. I think that obviously he's not built like a lot of these heavyweights are. So maybe he goes back down to Cruiserweight, does something that's never been done, puts one more step above Evander Holyfield so he can separate himself and truly be the best Cruiserweight of all time. Goes back down there. There's a bunch of names there. I mean, you got. What's his name? Opatai, who's really building himself up, but maybe isn't there yet, and he sees something that he can exploit. You get a win over a guy like Opatai, you pick up a couple of titles down there. I mean, yeah, you're doing something that's never been done. In that case, that's the only way I can think about, why he would do this, because like you said, he's been to the top of the heap. Why go backwards and go fight those guys unless you don't want to tangle with these other big heavyweights?
Paulie, A, what's your thought on that strategy? And B, of all the weight classes in boxing, Cruiserweight is the only one that I can't imagine a time in my boxing fandom, which is 40 years at this point, where it's been the marquee division in boxing. It's one of the few that hasn't been a lot of glory at Cruiserweight. What's your thought on all this, Paulie?
My thought is this. I've been around Oleksandr Usyk, enough. I think Chris has been around him. Chris, you've been around him enough a little bit?
No. His team, yes. His team.
I've been around Oleksandr Usyk, not as much as some others, but enough to get a gauge on his personality. He's very, very serious when it comes to his boxing. He's a serious guy. But he's also the anti in terms of what the old Soviet bloc fighters look like an Ivan Drago, like no personality, like stoic. In his regular life, this guy has a big sense of humor, and he's very funny, and he's very sarcastic. And when it's outside of him, when he has to take something serious, he's actually the opposite of serious in a lot of things, and cracks a lot of jokes and whatnot. I think he's trolling.
He likes to dance. Too.
I think he's trolling.
You think so?
Yeah, I think he's trolling. I think he's trolling.
But who is he trolling? Why?
Just to play around.
Just anyone?
Yeah, I think he had the pressure off him. He beat Fury. He's got some time now. And he's just like, all right, bro, you're going to keep bothering me with questions about this and boxing and stuff. You know what? I don't want to deal with it. I'm going to go down the Cruiserweight. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm going to take a guess that he's trolling, man. I don't
know, man, because I feel like whenever he trolled, he had a target. Like, it was his opponent. Like, he trolled Anthony Joshua, like,
he could be targeting the media, Could be targeting.
Yeah, he could be just, I'm done with you guys. Like, now you got to deal with this. I mean, that's possible. I don't know, man.
But, Chris, the thing I was thinking about when you were talking about this, well, he doesn't want to fight the bigger guys at heavyweight. He's talked about retirement. Why would you go down to a weight class, lose the weight? We'll talk about the physical cost and what he might lose in that division in a minute. But this idea of just retire. You don't want to fight those big guys. Fine. If he beats Fury, arguably, let's take a little supposition.
In
If
the
he beats
rematch.
Fury twice, he's the greatest of this era, not hurting for money anytime soon. He could walk off into the sunset and be established as an all-time great, right? So the idea, maybe he doesn't want to fight those bigger guys. I don't want to fight him. This seems like the logical choice to me.
I think the only thing that's really left to do, because there's still people who are going to argue that Evander Holyfield is a better cruiserweight. So I think that's the only thing still in question. So if he goes back to cruiserweight, he's going to put that to bed, as long as he wins, which isn't guaranteed either. But that's the only thing I can think of. The only thing that's left to do is to really separate himself from Evander Holyfield as the best cruiserweight ever.
One of the things, by the way, before you were on, Paulie, we were talking about, Chris and I, was, Chris was saying, and you can say it if you'd like, cruiserweights hit as hard as heavyweights. It's not a whole lot easier, right? Are there difficulties as far as you're concerned, Paulie? Assuming he's not trolling, he really does want to do this. Cruiserweights might not have the name recognition of heavyweights, but still dangerous guys who hit very, very hard. What's your thought on that?
And you risk weakening yourself. Let's not forget Roy Jones at that age went back down in weight, and you weaken yourself more at that age when you're trying to drop down weight classes. It's not the same as when you're younger. Your body just doesn't do it the same way. Seems like Usyk has packed on a lot of muscle. I wouldn't think it would end well. And yes, that means the punches at cruiserweight, you may feel those punches more because now you've also drained yourself from making the weight. As far as the comparison of Holyfield at cruiserweight, it's a difficult one. Certainly they're head and shoulders above the rest. Maybe David Haye has got a in the next level down of Jean-Marc Mormec, those kind of guys. But really,
that's a far number 3.
Yeah, exactly. And there's Usyk and Holyfield, the top two. But again, I'm going to say what I always say. I mean, I think the competition is more difficult now because you're dealing with the Soviets, and you weren't dealing with the Soviets in the 80s and prior. So, the cruiserweights, especially the cruiserweight division, which was a relatively new division back then. Muhammad Kawi was a menace, and he was a difficult guy to deal with.
Yeah.
As far as the rest of the unification, I don't know. He also didn't have to unify 4 titles. He only had to reunify 3. Usyk unified 4 titles, and I feel like, again, with the entrance of the Eastern Europeans in this era, Usyk himself being an Eastern European, so he himself would not have even been in that foray if he was around in the 80s. I think winning the cruiserweight title the way Usyk did it was a more difficult proposition, especially with the guys he had to beat. I mean, guys like Murat Gassiev and the rest of the bunch there. That was a very difficult cruiserweight tournament.
And remember also, speaking of Eastern Europeans, Vasily Zhirov, great fighter, and it was excellent in the cruiserweight division. But this idea you're saying, Paulie, of it would be a difficult
James Toney beat him.
Yeah. James Toney in a great fight.
In a great fight.
Check it out on YouTube. Vasily Zhirov versus James Toney, another great fight. Look, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, you touched on it. Let's dive into it. The physical cost of going down to cruiserweight for maybe the best heavyweight of his era when we come back.
June 28th. Live from the Entertainment and Sports Arena in Washington, D.C., WBA Super Featherweight World Champion Lamont Roach Jr. will defend his title against undefeated challenger, fearless Fergal McCrory of Ireland. Catch all the action live in Washington, D.C. on ProBox TV, or even better, download the ProBox TV app.
That's right, June 28th, Washington, D.C., the hometown champion, Lamont Roach Jr., defending his title against the undefeated Irishman. We saw him Wednesday. He promised fireworks in this fight. Well, we have another fight coming up tomorrow. That's right. Now, we have a big favorite. What can we do to make money on Xander Zayas? Well, that's what the Bettor Side is for.
Well, 5 straight winning weeks, and we gave a little back. So time to start a new streak here on the Bettor Side, and we're going to stay stateside in the big city, Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend in New York. And Xander Zayas headlines his first card as he takes on the Brazilian Patrick Teixeira, 10 rounds at 154 pounds. And for Zayas, he is the up-and-coming star at Top Rank, 21 years old, undefeated, and he headlines the card. And if you go to sportsbetting.ag, Zayas a monstrous favorite, right? Minus 1,500, while Teixeira the underdog at 8-1. No interest on that. So how do we approach it? dare I say, what is the better side? Well, let's look at it this way. Listen, this is the toughest competition Xander Zayas has faced in his young career. He's undefeated, and Patrick Teixeira, listen, former champion. He's been in the ring with Carlos Adames. He beat Carlos Adames, who is the current middleweight champion, and he was also in the ring against champion Brian Castano. He is going to give Zayas a test, and we're going to see rounds. So what do we say? How about Xander Zayas by decision? That's plus money, plus 130 at sportsbetting.ag. And if we go with decision, well, that means the fight's going to go the distance. So a big old yes to that, plus 120 at sportsbetting.ag. And just to finish the trifecta, how about over 8.5 rounds, minus 115. Listen, it's going to be a test. I think Xander wins the fight. I don't know if he's got that knockout power to put Patrick Teixeira down. A great test for the youngster, and of course a big weekend for all the Boricuas out in New York. So Xander Zayas by decision, over 8.5 rounds, and the fight's going to go the distance. Have a great weekend. I'm Jim Rodriguez, as always, on the better side.
Xander Zayas versus Patrick Teixeira. You see it, 18-0, 34-4. That experience factor, a big part of J-Rod's pick there. This will go the distance. Makes sense to me. And Chris, I know I'm looking at a disappointed look on your face. Don't worry, his pants were awful. His pants were absolutely, I know the jacket seemed, like he got that from a store, not a funeral home. His pants were terrible. So he did have the actual terrible pants.
What are you talking about?
J-Rod's pants when he had, oh my God, because the jacket looked pretty normal. Like,
I was on the Teixeira and Xander. I'm like, I thought Xander looked nice at the press conference.
J-Rod's pants were absolutely awful. So I saw that disappointed look on your face. He did look terrible from the waist down. Anyway, moving on. Oleksandr Usyk, what we're talking about, his reported cut to cruiserweight, said he might do it. Look, you're a fitness guy. You're a nutrition guy. You've helped guys get ready for fights. You've helped guys in camp, Chris. It is so difficult to cut down in weight as you get older. Yep. Usyk, 37 years old, and we say it all the time, he's small for this era of heavyweight, still gets into the 220s. He's not a small guy. Going back down, Paulie said it last segment, it's one of those things where Roy Jones Jr. killed his career, going up to heavyweight, went back down to light heavyweight. We know about the Antonio Tarver fights, looked terrible in those. It's kind of the end of the Roy Jones Jr. as we knew him. Could it be a similar thing for Usyk?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, like you said, going backwards in weight at, an advanced age, he's 37. He's older than Roy was when he did it. And Roy was, he was a very small heavyweight, and they went back down to 75 to light heavyweight. So we skipped cruiserweight altogether. Now we're talking cruiserweight from heavyweight, so it's not quite as far, but Usyk is a bigger guy. Usyk was huge at cruiserweight. 6'3", long, tall. So I don't know if making that weight at 37 is going to be definitely not going to be easy. I don't know if it's going to be possible either. But there is one caveat, because I do believe that Usyk was fighting when cruiserweight was at 190. The limit was 190. It's now since gone up to 199 or under 200. So maybe he might be thinking, like, wow, I got more weight. I got plus 10 pounds than what I had last time. Maybe I can get there. Also, he says that he's been eating up to get the heavyweight, to get to 223. So does that mean that he really walks around 215, 213, something like that? And then in which case the cut is very normal. So it's a curious situation, and to your point, champ, we might be blown in the wind right now. There's no pissing in the wind, rather, and there's no reason to even be discussing this because this is all a troll. But I don't know. I'd be curious to see how this plays out.
Now, Paulie, my question for you is: I often say that the fighters are like addicts, right? They're addicted to winning. They're addicted to be great. They're addicted to being world champions. The problem with addicts is they always overestimate their tolerance for a bunch of things. Usyk, you still think like you're in your 20s. Oh, I can make that weight. No, you're 37. You can't quite make it. Have you seen that before in fighters, Paulie? And you think it might happen with Usyk where, oh, yeah, I think I can. I used to do it before. That was a long time ago. Do you think fighters have an unrealistic idea of what they can do?
I think so, but I think it's more Western fighters. I don't know that you see this comes back down to like that mental discipline, and sometimes Western fighters, I think we more so like to lie to ourselves more at times. I don't know. I haven't seen Eastern fighters do this either. Where they stick around way too long. Yes, Klitschko got beat, and then he came back against Joshua, fought a great fight, got beat, but then what did he do? He retired, right? So I don't know. I mean, I don't see Usyk pushing it. I don't see Usyk pushing it. I think part of his mental discipline is the fact that he knows not to stick around too long, and he knows what the limitations are of his body. I think it's something very calculated. I personally, like I said, I think it's personally trolling. If he would do it, I would be shocked. he would try to go back down to cruiserweight. But the champ Chris made some good points. You got to only make 200 pounds. What if he's eating up? He looked pretty big to me though, man, at heavyweight.
Well, Paulie, when it comes to the legacy talk, like, what will be the thought process of adding this to his legacy? It seems like a heavyweight. If you're great at heavyweight, you're a great fighter. Period. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think that it's the points you also made before, Jimmy, where the cruiserweight division is sort of something that is second nature sometimes, and sort of not thought about as much. To go back to a weight class like that after he's accomplished so much, it would be more. The juice is not worth the squeeze. It would be more difficult than what the reward would be to add more cruiserweight titles, because the cruiserweight division is still remains tough. Again, you got the Opetaias of the world and whatnot. But also you got to now struggle more to make the weight possibly. And really, you're not getting a whole lot of credit for it. You're not. So, I mean, the juice is just not worth the squeeze. I think we're just pissing in the wind here.
And also, champ, what if he loses? Because it's not guaranteed. This is boxing, guys.
That's why
the legacy is affected the other way, in a negative aspect. So, like you said, the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Well, we had a conversation about the pound-for-pound king, Usyk, at the top of that list. Check it out on our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, let us know what you think. Make us part of your boxing routine. I'll take a quick break. When we come back, Usyk adding his voice to the talk about Canelo versus Terence Crawford. You know who he picked? Bud. We'll talk about that when we come back. Welcome back to Deep Waters here on ProBox TV. Well, it's a hypothetical fight that may or may not happen. We know about Terence Bud Crawford fighting Israel Madrimov August 3rd, but a lot of talk that this 154-pound fight could be a warm-up for a showdown with Canelo Alvarez somewhere between 168 and 154. Now, some people think it's a pipe dream, but when Turki Al-Sheikh wants to put his money behind it, certainly might happen. Well, Oleksandr Usyk, man we just talked about dropping down to cruiserweight, says that Terence Crawford would be the man in that fight. He gives him good odds of winning. Chris, when you look at this, a lot of people who know boxing, I would argue maybe even as well as you do, say that, Terence Crawford might be the man in that fight. And other people think it is absolute suicide. What are your thoughts on so many names lining up behind Terence Crawford?
I mean, I'm not going to say he's the man in that fight, but is there a path to victory for him? Absolutely. I mean, he is an incredibly dynamic and special human being. And it makes sense that Usyk is saying that, Crawford can do that, because he is the guy who has stepped over all those odds and overcome all of that, especially when it comes to size. So for Usyk, he's looking at this as skill versus skill, where they're at in their careers. It seems like Canelo has been a little bit diminished in the last couple of years. Crawford looks like he's getting better. So, if you're comparing those two and where they're at in their careers, it doesn't seem as crazy as it did initially when it first came out. And Usyk is saying, like, listen, I did it. I bet you he can do it too. So I'm not super surprised there, Usyk, a master boxer, take the side of a guy like Canelo, a guy like Crawford, who is also a master boxer.
Look, the comparison you can't get around, especially you're my generation, of course, is Hagler versus Leonard. That's the ultimate guy moving up, guy who's established at a much higher weight class, even though it was 160, not 168. Is that the boogeyman in people's minds, Paulie, when they think about this showdown? A very skilled boxer with a lot of speed versus a guy who has dominated heavier weight classes. What's your thought on that comparison?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing more and more in this generation where, the smaller guy used to be the old saying was a good big man beats a great little man, right? That used to be the old saying. And I think that sort of has changed.
That came from Sugar Ray Robinson fighting
Joey Maxim.
Joey Maxim.
And in this generation, we've kind of gone away from that, and we've seen some smaller guys being able to come up and get the job done. More and more. Take that as you will, right? I mean, maybe the fight, either it's the two things that people don't want to talk about. It's either the fighters today are better than yesterday's fighters, which nobody ever wants to talk about because they're all attached to yesterday's fighters, or there's so many PEDs in the sport that weight classes are not mattering anymore. One or the other or both. It's you're gonna have to accept one or the other. Either today's fighters are just better, and that's why they're able to do things that those guys weren't, or there's just an abundance of PEDs at this point. But either way, I'd say, it wouldn't be the biggest shock for me for Crawford to beat Canelo. It wouldn't be the biggest shock. Listen, is it a tough proposition? Absolutely. But I think there are other results in the sport that I've seen that probably would have shocked me more if they happened, or when they did happen. Then it would shock me if Crawford beats Canelo. You'd still consider it a special achievement. But keep in mind, Canelo is, like I said, I mean, maybe the third best super middleweight in the world right now, maybe, and he's diminishing little by little. So, it's not like it's kind of a I don't want to minimize the accomplishment. I don't want it to sound wrong, but it's like a cheap way to grab the super middleweight undisputed title in a way, or the unified title, because the IBF title has now been stripped from Canelo. But it's because you got a guy who's holding on to all the belts hostage when he probably, if he was forced to fight the best guys in the weight class, probably wouldn't have them anyway. And then would Crawford fight a Morrell or a Benavidez? Probably not, right? So you're seeing an opportunity with his sort of a weaker champion, and you're jumping on it right now. And I don't, listen, it's still a fight that brings curiosity because Crawford is a smaller guy. He's, he was a lightweight at one time. So, there is opportunities here where you're looking at it and saying, he's too small, he just can't get it done. But at the same time, when you look at all the variables together, it's still, there's a path to victory for Crawford. It's not the biggest shock.
Well, he has the skills, he has the technique, he has the speed. We'll see with the August 3rd fight against Israel Madrimov if that makes us believe that he could maybe beat Canelo. We'll keep an eye on that one. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, that's right, Adrien Broner returning to boxing tonight. What happened to him and his career? We break it down when we come back. Welcome back. Adrien Broner returns to boxing right down the road against Blair Cobbs tonight. Now, he's a multiple-time world champion, respectable record, respectable career, but it seems as though Broner never fulfilled the potential of his career. We thought he might be in the beginning. Chris, is that fair? Is that overly critical? What's your thoughts on the total career of Adrien Broner at this point?
I mean, what is he, a 4-division world champion, I believe? So,
his losses are respectable. They've aged well.
Yeah, he lost to Marcos Maidana. He's fought a who's list of guys. But in terms of being a 4-division world champion, I would say he's probably the worst 4-division world champion that we've ever seen. That's a very short list, and his victories after 135, because I think that's really what his downfall was, his ability not to stay in the weight classes where he belonged. At 130 and 135, he was an absolute nightmare. He was great to watch, good punching power, good speed. About 40 and 47, just not the same guy. And I think as his career went on, he got a little older, discipline, outside of the ring stuff got caught wind, and this is why we're fighting this kind of fight.
Yeah. Well, when you look at it, Paulie, do you agree with Chris that could have been more than he was, despite accomplishing some very good things in the ring?
No, I don't think he could have been more than he was. I think he was a world-class fighter who won world titles. I think he was certainly a world-class fighter. But yes, overrated in that he was chosen as the next Mayweather. I think that was a bit too much of a burden for him to carry, and I don't know that he was ever going to be that good. But that not being the next Mayweather doesn't mean you're not world-class. Me and Chris Algieri are both world champions. We weren't the next Mayweather, right? So that you can still be overrated when it comes to the way they viewed Adrien Broner and still be world class. So I'll tell you what, even at 130, he hadn't convinced me. I remember when I was fighting him, I looked at his record, and the guy he won the world title against at 130 was a vacant world title. The guy had 2 losses. One of his 2 losses was to a sub 500 record. Okay. That's the guy he beat for the 130-pound world title. And then I thought he lost to Ponce de Leon at 130 pounds as well. Looked excellent at 135. There were some fights where you got some flashes of brilliance, and that's where you realize Broner was a world-class fighter. He was
DeMarco especially.
But nonetheless, there was also the signs where he wasn't going to be that next Mayweather, and I think that's where the word overrated comes in. But it's got to be put into the proper context. This was a world-class fighter who was overrated because of the way they pushed him to become the next Mayweather when he wasn't.
Important thing to keep in mind is fighters do not rate themselves. We rate them. And they don't always live up to the hype that we, as boxing media, have you want to put us, we put it on people. It's not the boxer's fault. They go out there and fight. So overrated, there's a lot to be said about that. Anyway, Jimmy Smith, it's been Deep Waters yet again here on ProBox TV. Like, subscribe, check out our library. Got a lot of fight stuff for you. Make us part of your routine. We'll see you next time.